Hello, I'm Lisa Capalla. Welcome to Where's Wilmington? For the next half an hour, we're going to be talking about what's going on in your community, specifically about the Wilmington Town Museum. So I have with me Terry McDermott.
Hi.
Nice to meet you. She is the curator of the Wilmington Town Museum, and we're going to talk a little bit about that and what goes on there if you haven't been, and if you have been, what's new. So first, let's start off, Terry, and tell the folks a little bit about what a curator does. What really are your responsibilities?
Well, at the Town Museum, as the curator, of course, I take people through the museum on tours, and we sponsor programs. I work with the Historical Commission and some of the programs they put on at the Town Museum. The Friends of Harnden Tavern also put on programs at the museum, and I work with them, but they have a lot of experience. They've been involved with the Town Museum at the Harnden Tavern for, golly, I think almost 30 years, for a long time. And we have exhibits at the Town Museum, different exhibits talking about different parts of Wilmington's history. And also, of course, the story of the Harnden family and the Brown family who lived in that house for most of the time.
Okay. What kind of training does someone need to become a curator?
Well,
and what are your responsibilities? I know it's pretty broad-based.
It is. And to be a curator, my training, because I never planned to be a curator. So my training for this job was really an interest in Wilmington's history, an interest in history in general. I was on the Wilmington Historical Commission for a couple of years, and my predecessor as town curator was Kathleen Black Reynolds, who really originated the position at the Town Museum. And in February of 2005, when she needed to move on, I was offered the position as somebody who knew a lot about Wilmington's history and was very interested in it. We also accept donations from residents when they have different things pertinent to the town's history, the town's past, photographs often, and different types of relics. And some of them we try to rotate in different displays at the museum. Right now, a big exhibit that we have is the Henny collection, which has to do with Henry Wilson Sargent, who was a local character who died in the middle of the 20th century, but he was a rather eccentric mechanical genius who created a lot of mechanical toys for his own amusement, as far as we know. And he died in the 1940s, so there are people in town who remember him. So when we opened that exhibit in February of this year, we had a large turnout of people who are very interested in Wilmington history and in this particular person. And that exhibit is actually still at the museum. It will probably be up throughout the summer.
Okay.
One of our several different exhibits we have about the Wilmington's history.
So you say you yourself are interested in history, have always been probably your whole life, I
Yes,
guess.
oh, for sure.
Why specifically Wilmington? Of course you live here, but what's so rich about Wilmington's history that maybe folks don't know?
Gee whiz, that's a really good question. I have only lived in Wilmington myself for about 15 years, and when I was home, when my children were babies, and I went to the library, which has a pretty good collection of Wilmington history books, and some of them are now for sale actually at the Town Museum. I saw pictures of what the town was like mid-20th century, early 20th century, and I really liked it. I liked what I saw. It was a place I wanted to be. It looked very different than it does now. Even, people who've lived here only 30 years have told me how much the town has changed. And working at the Town Museum is so interesting because everybody who comes by, whether they've lived in town for 5 years or 50 years, can teach me something about the town. They know something about the town I haven't heard before. Different characters. I reading the books about Wilmington, about this Henry Wilson Sargent, about Arthur Bond, who was a gentleman who died in the 1930s. At one point, he wanted to write a history of the town of Wilmington, and his particular interest was more personal because his family was from Wilmington. He had been born in Wilmington, and his family was actually relatively prominent in Wilmington, so that the story of Wilmington was very wrapped up with his own family story. But just the fact that it was a small rural town, that everyone seemed to know everybody, that you see the pictures of country lanes, and the whole idea of Silver Lake as a big tourist attraction, all those things I just found very interesting.
Why do you think it's important for Wilmington and other towns to have museums? We obviously don't have the big art galleries and the tapestries and the things that you might see at the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston or the Isabel Stewart Gardner. But what do we really have that makes it important for us to even continue?
I think it's just the story of the people who were in Wilmington, and I think that there are I find that people who have been in Wilmington their whole life are eager to talk about their past and share it with other people, and they don't want it to be forgotten just because it's a part of who they are. It defines who they are. And on the other hand, I find people who are new, like myself, or even newer, they just find different things very interesting. They come to the museum and they learn about Henry Wilson Sargent, or they learn about Arthur Bond, or they learn about Mrs. Hiller, who was an eccentric woman who died in 1901. She was very concerned with her death, planning her death many years before she died. It was just very important to her to know what was going to happen to her after she died. She was very involved with cemetery improvement.
Wow.
She was just another rather eccentric character, and people just find those stories fascinating, especially because Wilmington is a great town, but that's not the town it is now. It
Right.
seems so different now than it was then, and when everybody knew everybody.
And don't you think, too, as a participant, when you're walking through the tour or when you're learning things like you have about the people who lived here, you find that there's parallels, that even though the community is different, the things that we worry about is still the same.
Oh, sure.
You know, worrying about planning out your death, will you be remembered?
Right.
You know, being concerned with improvements in your town. Do you find that people are amused by the parallels that they see? The problems that were the problems then are still kind of the problems that we have now.
Oh yeah, and even when I take kids through the Harnden Tavern, you know, we have one room that's the parlor, and when I bring the kids, it's the more formal room in the house, and when I bring kids into it, a lot of them haven't heard of a parlor, but I say, well, what room does this remind you of? It reminds you of the living room at your house or at your grandmother's house or something like that. And even that, because when they first come into the house, it may not look like a house that they live in,
Right.
but we even talk about, oh, you know, this house has been around for over 200 years. How did they heat this house? When it was first built, of course, there were fireplaces. Then there were stoves in front of the fireplaces. And then eventually there were radiators, relatively modern radiators, although even that isn't, a lot of kids don't know what that is. Kids who come in, they're just fascinated by sometimes the littlest things. Like the radiators can fascinate some kids. Old-fashioned clocks might fascinate them. Seeing the big fireplace where people would have cooked their meals,
Right.
that can fascinate them. So,
And I would imagine a sense of appreciation, too, for the technology that you have only in even 30 or 40 years, going from, you know, where you started to where we are now.
oh, right, exactly. And for example, in the Henry Wilson Sargent exhibit, Henny Penny, that's up right now, a big part of Henny Penny's interest at the turn of the last century was steam power, because that was the Industrial Revolution. That was modern technology. So I said to some kids who came a couple of weeks ago, well, you know, now computers are modern technology. If you wanted to learn about modern technology and how the world is working, you learn about computers. Kids might play with computers to try to learn how things are going today. Well, he played with steam engines because that was learning what the grown-ups and how people were going forward back in his day. So again, you talk about the parallels between now and then. You can always find something.
Right. As far as the building itself, the house that you're in, is this where the Wilmington Museum always has been?
Yes, this is, in fact, it's my understanding that the Wilmington Town Museum, the Colonel Joshua Harnden Tavern has been owned by the town of Wilmington since 1973. It was taken by eminent domain when a developer had contemplated demolitioning it, tearing it down, and a special town meeting was held, and the town voted to take it by eminent domain to preserve it for historic preservation. For a long time, the town, after the town acquired it, they rented it out. There was a caretaker who would live there, and the caretaker did open it to the public on, you know, I think once a month, twice a month, and for meetings. But in the late 90s, after several different caretakers, and I think it was, you know, a great experience for all involved, but when the caretaker at the time had to move on, I think the Historical Commission studied the issues and, working with the town, and I believe there was a town meeting vote, decided that they wanted the building to be a little more available to the public. So instead of having somebody live there, they would hire a curator, and that way it could be open more often and have a little more professional management. So, as I said before, Kathleen Black Reynolds was the first curator, and she really originated the position, and she created it out of, I don't want to say nothing because it's a wonderful building, and the Friends of Harnden Tavern have done many, many things with it over the years, but the idea of having a professional involved with the building, she really originated that.
Excellent. As far as the building itself, I've never been. Where is it located and what does it look like?
Well, it's on Route 62. It's a big white building, very close to the road, as a matter of fact. And there is, a lot of people call it the barn, but it's really the carriage house, which is right next to it on the property. It's very big. Once you go inside, it's quite large. Has 3 different sets of stairs. At one point it had 3 working bathrooms. Now it only has 1. There is a relatively modern kitchen, which is where I would imagine the people who lived there up until the 1990s, did their cooking and eating and whatnot. But of course there is the old-fashioned kitchen or keeping room, which has a big fireplace and all the cooking utensils in it and around it, and a dining table there. There's a grog room, because of course in the early, the house was initially built as a residential home, and it was, as far as we know, Joshua Harnden was the first person who lived there. Didn't become a tavern until he was elected to the Board of Selectmen in 1794.
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah, exactly. As a member of the Board of Selectmen, apparently that's why it was more of a political obligation that he opened his house as a tavern, because the selectmen needed to make sure that there were appropriate places for travelers.
Right. Well, there was a need then for places for people to stay. It's not like we have today, so that makes sense.
Exactly, and it was on a crossroads, as I tell the kids. It was on a crossroads then, as it is now. Right now it's on a corner as well of 2 important roads, so it was a good place for a tavern to be. But it was still his family home. That was the main purpose of the building and the main reason he acquired it. He didn't buy it to go into the tavern business. And by the time he died in 1807, as far as we know, either then or shortly thereafter, he discontinued being a tavern.
Right.
By 1818, the Brown family had purchased it, and again, they purchased it as a family home. As far as we know, they never operated it as a tavern at all, although after the Civil War, 1870s or so, we believe they opened it as a boarding house. And they, in fact, if you look at the building right now, there is, on the right-hand side, there's a, quote, newer wing. The whole building looks pretty antique, but to the right it's a little newer, probably went up, as I said, after the Civil War, or at least was built up after the Civil War, and that we suspect that's probably where they would have had their guests when it was a boarding house. It wasn't that uncommon to have boarding houses in Wilmington and the surrounding area, because it was kind of rural and the trains had come in at that point, so there was pretty easy access from Boston.
And I would imagine Lowell, from some of the industrialization of Lowell, maybe some folks were staying out here
Oh,
too.
sure, and there was Silver Lake in one area, and then we're actually kind of closer to Martin's Pond in the other. And a lot of farmland, people just wanted to be out in the country, so it was a good place to stay for that. And Brown family and their descendants had it until about the middle 1930s or so. By the 1940s, Dr. Rounds had bought it, Dr. Charles Rounds, and he lived there until his death in 1972. And it was shortly after that that the town acquired it. So there haven't been a lot of owners.
Right. You really know your stuff, by the way.
Well, I
appreciate that. Tell us a little bit about when we can come by and visit, and some of the prices for people to get in and see the museum. If you haven't, and if you have, it's probably a great time to come and check out the new exhibits that you have as well.
Absolutely. And for one thing, unless there's a special event going on, which does happen occasionally, we're generally free. So that's a good thing. That's a very good thing. Through the end of June, I'll be there Tuesdays and Thursdays from 10 to 2. And the first Sunday of the month from 2 to 4. After the 4th of July, I'll go into my summer season, and we'll be there Thursdays and Fridays from 10 to 2. Okay. And still the first Sunday of the month from 2 to 4.
And all of this is listed when you call the phone number.
Absolutely.
Which is what?
978-658-5475.
Excellent. And you folks have a website that people can look at? And
we do have a website, and I believe that is going to be on the screen, as a matter of fact. So. And I did want to add, too, as far as the summer programs, that on Fridays, we are, as I said, open 10 to 2, but from noon to 2, weather permitting, we have picnic lunches outside. Well, we encourage people to bring their own picnic lunch, I should say, and we have a very nice garden in the back that was put in by the garden club, and a bench. We have a picnic table that was donated by the Girl Scouts, and we have a nice lawn, and we have lawn games. We had, last year we had badminton, and we have some colonial games and crafts and things like that. And again, it's all free, just something to do.
Wow.
12
so that's
to 2.
a hidden gem in our little community
there you
here,
go.
if you don't know about it. Thank you so much for being with us and telling us about the Wilmington Town Museum. We're going to have Rosemary Crowley up next. She is a friend of the Wilmington Town Museum. She's in that program. She's going to talk to us a little bit about how you can get more involved. So stay right there for more of Where's Wilmington. We'll be right back.
I'm Nicole. I'm 17. and I just had a baby. When I was pregnant, I felt like there was nowhere to turn. A nurse told me about Baby Safe Haven, a new law that helps people in my situation as a last resort. She said there were places that can accept a newborn baby. I took my baby to an emergency room. They really were a safe haven.
Go to babysafehaven.com or call 866-814-SAFE.
If you can't keep your baby, you can keep your baby safe.
If you think about where these dogs are coming from, they're not being bred to be sold to people. These are dogs that are already in the world and they don't have a home, they don't have anyone taking care of them or looking after them. She was spayed, she had all of her shots, she was started on all the puppy meds, and then she came with a leash and a collar and some food, and we were off in the car with our little puppy.
Hi, I'm Catherine McKenna from Troop 1799, and you're watching WCTV, Wilmington Community.
Hi, welcome back to Where's Wilmington? I'm Lisa Capala, and you're here for the second half of our program, and today we're talking about the Wilmington Town Museum, or the Harnden, am I getting it right?
Harnden Tavern.
Harnden Tavern. It's a tough one. I've heard it called Harding, but we're going to get it right. So Rosemary, thanks for being with us.
My pleasure, Lisa.
You are from the Friends of the Wilmington Town Museum.
Actually, it's the Friends of the Joshua Harnden Tavern.
Okay.
Organization was started in 1975 by a group of citizens in town that were actually involved in the preservation of the property, and were part of the group that saved it from demolition.
Which is
many
something
years
Terry
ago.
was telling us about after the Brown
Correct.
family took it over, and then the doctor had it, and then you folks acquired it. How important do you feel it is, I know you're in real estate also on the side, to preserve buildings and to keep them in the state that they're in?
It's enormous. I mean, it's such a treasure to have. Wilmington is very, very fortunate to have interest in preserving history and an interest in opening that history to the public.
Why do you feel it's important? Your personal opinion.
Things change. Life changes. What happened in the 17, 18, 19, early 1900s, people today don't realize. And to have a living history, to have a piece of property that you can go to that is actually preserved in the state that carries through those decades is an amazing thing to have.
Is it unusual for a town to adopt little buildings and save them, in your experience?
I don't think so. I think we have great examples in both Lexington and Concord on a much larger scale.
Right.
But to have a small town like Wilmington do that, I think it's a wonderful example for other towns in the area. I know Reading has done some as well. It's a great opportunity. It really is.
It's a good thing to preserve for our grandchildren and
Most
the other folks to
definitely.
come along. Tell me a little bit about how you got involved, and I know you're from Tewksbury like
I
myself.
am. I'm an
So,
outsider.
Tewksbury needs a little museum, I guess, itself. But
I think they
not so little,
probably
actually,
do.
the Wilmington Museum is. But tell me a little bit about why you, as a Tewksbury resident, felt you wanted to get involved with the Wilmington Museum.
I moved to Tewksbury 25 years ago and often read in the local paper about this wonderful holiday social that went on at the Harnden Tavern. And often said I must stop by and never seemed to get there. One December, I was on my way home from prior engagement. It was starting to snow. It looked picturesque New England, and it just happened to be the day that the Friends of Harnden Tavern were having their holiday social.
Nice.
And I stopped in, and I was struck the minute I walked through the door by how festive it was, how warm it was, how welcoming it was. And I guess I stayed. I've done a few rounds of president and vice president, and it's just been a wonderful opportunity to be involved.
What exactly is your capacity with the organization, and what is the mission statement, if you will, of the organization?
We have a mission statement that's very similar to the Historic Commission in town, to the Minutemen, to other groups in town, and that's to preserve, conserve, and educate. And
Okay,
the group,
so how are we conserving?
how are we conserving? We're conserving the property. We're conserving donations of items as Terry had said, that are to the period of the house and the generations that followed in the house.
We're preserving by doing similar things like that, making sure the
Correct.
building, I would imagine too, when you do renovations, you've got to make sure to find things that are in line with the structure of the building, right?
Most definitely.
That's got to be tough.
It is. It's a challenge. In fact, we brought in outside historical groups that have done research on the house as far as things like internal paint colors.
Wow.
And the wallpapers that would be used, so that any renovations that are done to period.
Right. And the education piece, this is part of that too.
This is part of it. We also host 2 events a year. We do a harvest festival in the fall that is focused around activities that would have been prominent in the 17 and early 1800s.
Such as
pit cooking. We do a fire pit and we create a meal off of the fire pit. We have demonstrations and hands-on demonstration of things like candle making, spinning, weaving, quilting. We have several members that are involved in other outside organizations such as the National Historic Parks, and we enjoy dressing up in costume and bringing history alive. It's great fun.
Why do you like it so much? I can tell when you talk about it that it really just gets you going. Why is it that you're so into history? And Terry too.
It's wonderful. It's part of our past. It's part of who we are, whether you've lived in Wilmington or not.
Right.
And I'm a living example of that. You don't have to come from Wilmington to be part of the Friends of Harnden and Tavern.
Now you said you have 2 events a year. So
We
the
do.
one is the festival that you just talked about with the candle making and the quilting.
Correct.
What's the other one?
The other one is the Holiday Social. It's an annual event. It's our oldest event. And that's held the 2nd Sunday in December.
And pretty much has always been?
Has always been in December. And the house is decorated in natural products, natural greenery.
Wow.
We do hot mulled cider, and we have a musical entertainment. And it's a wonderful opportunity to kind of decompress a little bit in a very harried season.
That's true. Okay, so now I see what you folks are doing for us. What do we as a community need to do for you?
Come to the Harnden Tavern, experience it, walk through the rooms, feel the history, and ask. We love to explain it. Terry does walking tours of the house. The Friends do our 2 annual events, and we'd love to do more, but we need more members.
And more members means more dollars, obviously.
More
How
dollars.
are you folks doing financially? This is a tough situation we're in right now financially. A lot of communities losing jobs. You know, people have been sending their money to other disasters that have happened, Katrina, other things, New Orleans, still going on. So how does something like the Wilmington Friends of the Museum stay and keep sustaining themselves in a time when it's so difficult for folks to donate time and money?
We're very fortunate. We have very committed membership. We have the commitment of the town, the support of the Historic Commission, the support of Terry as curator, and we're very fortunate. We're holding our own.
So you feel like you're not going anywhere?
Sure.
You could use more money. Yeah.
Everybody could use more money.
If you
but
had,
it's time.
if you had a little more money or time, would you be able to do more events during the year?
Most definitely, and more importantly, if we had folks that would like to join us.
Well, how does one become a member? Let's talk about that.
You can contact the Wilmington Town Museum and Terry McDermott, and we'd be happy to pass that message along, and one of us from the Friends will give you a call.
Now, once you become a member, what is your commitment as far as time? Are there meetings to attend and things like that?
Yes, we meet monthly on the 3rd Wednesday of the month at the Tavern, and that's where we do a lot of our planning for our events.
Okay. Do you also help decide what things might go into the museum? And
we do. We're very much a part of that. In fact, that was the original mission of the Friends, was to furnish the house. When the house was purchased by the town, there was very little in it.
Wow.
So the opportunity to find antiques and things of period. We've worked with the Historical Commission in renovations along the way, and to improve the house and the structure and viability of the house. And now our mission is primarily focused on education.
Getting the word out that you
Getting the
exist and
word
what
out
you do.
and providing educational events for people in town with an interest in history for the children of the town of Wilmington and for the surrounding communities.
What if someone finds something in their attic, or they purchase a home here in Wilmington, there's stuff in there that they think might be good stuff to have?
Give us a
What do we do?
call. Give us a call or send an email to the town museum. We'd be happy to talk with you about it. Perhaps we can provide some history for it if it's an item you found that you'd like to keep in your home and showcase. A
Really?
lot of times you find things you don't really know what it is or what to do with it.
True.
There's resources there for you, and we'd be happy to help.
Excellent. What do you really want the folks watching today to know about either what you're doing or the museum itself? What would you really like people to take away from this 15 minutes of fame we have here today?
It's a great resource. Cherish it and get involved in it. The commitment, it can be as little as attending the events, supporting the events, to being a board member, to being vice president or president of the Friends.
The sky's the limit, really.
You've got it. And we need all kinds of talent. So
Now, you may need
come.
office work. You could need people to get the word out. I mean, there's a lot of different things you can do. You don't
Most
necessarily have to have
definitely.
a strong interest in history, but wanting to be part of something.
Being part of the social events, being part of a strong organization in town, being part of a group that's providing education. We can teach you about history. That's the easy part.
Right, that's true. Anything final you'd like to add today before we close?
Come down and visit us, Lisa. We'd
And
love
what's
to
the
have
address?
you.
You guys are right
We're
near
on Route
62?
62 in Wilmington, right next to the Regional Health Center.
Excellent. I will make it a point to come and visit you.
Fabulous.
Rosemary, thank you so much
My
for the work that
pleasure.
you're doing. Thank you for watching the program here, Where's Wilmington? Just reminding you that we are on weekly here, and that you need to get out there and take a look at the museum. Get a part of the history. Get a little bit of a sense of where you're coming from and where you're going, and make these ladies, the work that they do, feel proud. Just to let you know, next time someone asks you, if they ask you, where's Wilmington, you tell them right here and right here on WCTV. I'm Lisa Capalla. Thanks for watching.